Welcome to the Medical Ancillary Sales Podcast, your number one source for making money in the medical ancillary sector. Mike and Viv bring you the latest information from lab services, pharmacy, diagnostic testing, and so much more. The latest in ancillary services will be right around the corner. Welcoming the hosts of the Medical Ancillary Sales Podcast, here's Mike and Viv.
Hello and welcome to the Medical Ancillary Sales Podcast. I'm your host, Michael Berg, and joined as always by Viv Hudson. Hello, Vivian. How are you?
I'm good, thanks, Mike. We have David Wolf on today, and David comes from a bit of a different background. So do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself, David?
Sure. Greetings, Michael, Vivian. I really appreciate the time today. I've been in medical device and healthcare and corporate America, big box, for 27 years. I was pre-med, couldn't get through the MCATs, so I found myself finishing up my business degrees. Son of a doctor, so I've seen the plight of the PCP over the last 15, 20 years. And I've really formed that into a career. And, part of my career is selling practices, doing joint ventures with hospitals and other entities. And a big part of that is hopefully the subject matter we're going to talk about today in compliance.
Well, yeah, and it's a perfect lead-in, David, because, honestly, if I see that there's a podcast on compliance, I'm a little worried that people are going to tune out right away thinking this is, maybe boring stuff. But I will tell you that when I was a pharmaceutical rep, I remember them telling us about a survey that they did on patients that studied the reasons why they make purchases or decisions. And the very top thing was avoiding risk. Doctors are risk averse by nature. And I think that, especially in the ancillary world, where this is a very highly regulated market, just understanding the natures and the complexities of the regulatory market and all the federal and state regulations can really give you a leg up. So I see a lot of value in this just in terms of setting yourself apart as a valuable resource for the physicians. So can you break down the different rules and regulations that are governing physicians right now? Everybody hears about Stark. Everyone hears about anti-kickback statutes. Can you kind of give us an overview of those?
Sure, absolutely. And what you said is true. And unfortunately, nobody listening to this podcast likes to go to the dentist either. But we all know why we have to go to the dentist. So it's just a necessary element to our business. Stark law, we'll talk about that first because it's probably the most common of the questions and the issues that come up in an exchange between a rep and a physician. So Stark law was a Senate bill that went through in the late 80s. And in the late 80s, you had a lot of physicians who, like my father, had been stripped of the ability to deliver babies or to do, small procedures like appendixes, things like that. And they needed to replace that income with something. And a lot of them decided to go buy pharmacies. They bought labs. They bought physical therapies, other entities, brick and mortar things. The problem is that they ended up taking away a lot of business from pharmacists and lab owners and physical therapists that depend upon those referrals themselves. And so what the Stark bill did is it basically said this: look, you have to supervise and you have to be in control of any medical procedure or secondary referral that you make. If you are not personally there to oversee that practice, and that you are not entitled to the money earned from an insurance carrier or from Medicare. Okay. So what Stark really is, it is a governor, if you will, to make sure that the physician never gets paid on something that he's not supposed to be paid on. That's the most general, vanilla way that I can say it. The great news is, for all the things we'll talk about today, very briefly too, is Wikipedia, every one of them. Because under Wikipedia, you've got very open, informal narrative on the history and the utility of each of these laws and how they are adopted and used in today's healthcare.
So if we look at some of the terms, like obviously you've just mentioned Stark right there, but what about some of the other terms that you hear being kicked around, such as inducement and anti-kickback, safe harbor, and fee splitting?
Yes.
How do they impact physicians as well? And as a rep, why is it important for you to be aware of these?
Yeah, the good news is that unlike Stark, the other items you just mentioned about are, by definition, what the name of the problem is. So inducement or anti-kickback means that I cannot provide money or assistance to make money to a physician as a vendor. All right. So general rule of thumb, no money may ever pass from a vendor to a physician, right? That is the inducement statute, okay? A kickback would be something like if you order, 25 of my nerve conduction studies, okay, I will give you $500 off your next invoice, okay? Or I will give you, the supplies to do it for next year, okay? So there's demarcations between what you want to do as a business and what you can do as a physician. Now, usually you don't get into the problems when you're dealing with commercial insurance. And these problems are only going to exist legally when you're talking about Medicare. Okay? So for example, let's say you do a nerve conduction study for a Medicare patient and you are the ancillary provider for that machine. For whatever reason, if Medicare denies that claim, the doctor still has to pay you for that service. He cannot go into that without risk. Okay? If he did take that discount or that rebate or the credit, that would in itself be termed as an inducement. So as you can see, everything flows around risk. Okay? If I'm going to do this service, then I have to show risk. If I'm going to invest in a pharmacy or invest in an MSO or whatever, I have to invest in it to show my risk. Okay, does that make sense?
Yeah, that does make sense. What I'm curious about, David, so you've been involved in buying and selling practices, you do medical consulting, so you probably talked to 1,000 doctors, I'm guessing. And compliance, I'm sure, has come up. How well versed on the different laws and regulations are most physicians? Do you find they generally are pretty well versed in it, or do you find a lot of ignorance out there?
No, unfortunately, you and me and Viv and others, we were in business school when they were in medical school. And a lot of these things fall under what they should learn as owning a practice and operating a practice. Most people will easily say that, looking at a physician, it's hard to see how they're good business people. Most of your reps can do a walk around the practice and say, if I was running this practice, I would not have, 6 people at the front desk, or, would have all this unused space, whatever it is. So they're not typically, and I'm being a little bit generalized, they're not all the best of business people, okay? But because of what's happened in the last 5-10 years, and especially in the last 3 years, where these doctors are jumping at these chances to make money, they don't always investigate the laws that protect them to make those money and implement those ancillary services to be completely above scrutiny and within safe harbor.
Do you think a lot of them are just trusting that, hey, this program wouldn't exist unless it was legal, so it must be legal, and they just don't really do their due diligence?
I think that's a part of it. I also think that they're more interested in making their payroll next Friday than they are in understanding the difference between anti-kickback inducement and, there's 25,000 doctors out there. Nobody's going to come after little old me. there's that part of it too.
Yeah, and I mean, I can attest to having been a health professional. So back when I was living in Australia, I was a pharmacist and I owned my own business. And there's certainly a lot of stuff that you need to learn when you do own your own business. And when you're so busy being the healthcare professional, it's hard to be an expert at absolutely everything. So let's get back to our roles as reps. So the reps out in the field, how can they talk about these issues with doctors to help engender more trust with their physicians and give them confidence in what they're selling physicians that is going to be help them sleep at night knowing that they're going to be fully compliant?
A great question, and we talked a little bit offline this. My best advice to the rep, because I've been the rep and I've ran the office and I understand the mind of a physician, I would say this. If you can frame the question in a way that elicits a response from the doctor that's not a yes or no, I think you'll find a lot of compelling responses in that. For example, Dr. Viv, can you share with me your understanding of Stark, anti-kickback, and safe harbor? And if they say, no, I can't, what you've just done is you've just given yourself another 30 minutes with that provider, which is a good thing. If they say, I understand it thoroughly, in fact, I've done this, my attorneys do counsel me on this, and this. Okay, terrific. That's what you want to hear. Whenever I hear my attorneys and I have vetted out how I'm going to integrate ancillary services into my practice, and there are certain things that must be in place before I bring on anything new, that is the response that I seek. And sometimes I would say to reps, ask them if they have an attorney that advises them on these laws. It's an insurance policy. It also helps protect them with their malpractice.
It seems like, honestly, a great opportunity for a rep. I mean, you have it's a competitive market. And as a rep, when you're walking into an office, chances are they've seen 10 other reps that day and half of them are selling the same stuff you're selling. I mean, that happens a lot. And so the hook really is to bring some value to them, be a resource to that physician to where they want to work with you versus everybody else. And as I spoke about in the beginning of the call, we know that physicians are risk averse, and that avoiding risk is the top criteria that they're looking for when they make a purchasing decision. I think you can really use that to your favor by bringing it back around, not in an accusatory manner, like, what's the matter? You don't know about Stark and anti-kickback? You're not well versed in it? But more position yourself as, hey, doctor, this is what I'm here for you to do. Could you make money doing ancillaries? Of course. That's a given. When you add on these programs, you can generate revenue. But what I'm here to do is show you how you can do it in a safe, compliant manner that's compliant with all federal and state regulations. I think that's a super effective tool right there.
It is, and let me pile on a little bit more. We all know in the pharma world, and we've all concluded, I mean, there's been hundreds of millions of dollars trying to understand how physicians learned. They like to learn by reading publications. So, and I'm sure, Michael, you were armed with several clinical double-blind studies, and that was how you sold. If you got that physician to read your double-blind study that's published in JAMA or New England Journal, that's how you compelled them to move forward to be satisfied. I would make the same claim with compliance. Get some studies, get some cases that came above to the OIG that said this doctor was arrested and indicted for doing this, and this. They'll read it. They'll read it like they read one of your drug studies, and they will intuitively, immediately accept it into their mind. Right. That works.
Yep. Well, last question for you, because we're running a little over time here. What are some resources that reps who are interested in learning more about these statutes, where should they turn?
Sure, real easy. Go to Wikipedia. Go educate yourself on Stark, on anti-kickback, on fee splitting, on safe harbor. What did I leave out, Viv? Inducement. There are several of them. They're so easy to understand. They're sensible rules. There's nothing magical or too corporately or too legal about them. They're just basic rules that say, I'm entitled to the money if I do the work. I'm not entitled to the money if somebody else does.
Great. Well, this is great information, David. I appreciate you getting on.
All right.
Thanks, David.
Guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you.